Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Embodied Self-Love series on the podcast. Today, we are getting into self-trust. If you are just stumbling upon the series, this is episode number 5. You can just dive in here with self-trust if you were just, searching around trying to find something about how to trust yourself more. And if you want to dive deeper into self-love and an actual framework for self-love that starts out with self-awareness, builds your self-knowledge, deals with self-acceptance, and then moves into self-trust, feel free to go back and watch or listen to the rest of the series. Today, I'm excited because I've been teaching about self-trust for over 7 years now. And there's some specific things that I always cover when I talk about trust, which I still will cover today. But this podcast episode, actually, it's coming out a couple days later than planned because the teaching, there was some recalibration to the teaching this year, which is no surprise. In real time, we're in COVID times still, and there's so much going on in the world. The energies are so intense. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of confusion. And so no wonder the teachings on self-trust were like, hey girl, we got to make some adjustments. So I'm excited because some of you have been following and listening for years and have heard me talk about trust a lot. And even for you, there's going to be some new stuff in this episode for you today. When I posted on Instagram to ask people their questions about self-trust, I got a lot of questions. I don't know that I'm going to be able to get through all of them, but I'm going to try to answer as many of them as I can. And I have my trusty notes here because there is a lot to cover. So let me dive in. Like I said, if you have been listening to this podcast for any length of time, I talk about trust all the time. And maybe you found me on someone else's podcast. And if you did, I was probably talking about trust. Trust is one of the absolute most integral things to my body of work over the years, even as the body of work has evolved. And when we talk about trust, we are always bringing it back to self-trust. Because one thing we know that we could always know for sure is that we can't control other people. We cannot control other people. We can't change other people. We can't grow on behalf of other people, but we can absolutely resolve our own stuff. And as women, and listen, I know we have non-women who listen and watch, but I am a woman. My work is with thousands of women over the years. That is where my expertise and my experience is. So I gear this towards women, although there's truth here for everybody. So feel free to take whatever resonates for you. But as women especially, we are on the tail ends of centuries of this programming that we can't trust ourselves. I saw a post on Instagram the other day by Stay Woke Tarot that told a story about a job interview she was in where a man literally said to her that women don't know what they want, so we have to tell them. It was like a marketing position. And so that's the type of stuff that people truly, honestly, even in today's modern world, some people believe and some people treat us this way. A lot of us were raised this way. So it takes time to practice and learn and make it your go-to behavior to trust your own truth, your own wants, your own desires and needs. And I really believe we have to, like, if you're here, if you're listening to this, if you do any kind of personal development, healing, growth, spiritual development work, if you're interested in a podcast about self-love, like, part of what you're here to do is to do this work so future generations do not have to do it the way we are doing it right now, where so much of it feels or has felt like pushing a boulder up a friggin' mountain, right? So the self-trust teaching, as I mentioned, wanted to come through a little differently this time. And it's because trust is harder when tragedy and trauma are rampant, when times are really challenging, because we get pulled into the why question. Why is this happening? Why would this be happening? And we don't know. And it doesn't make sense. We can conjecture. People have their own ideas about why. And listen, if it resonates for you, if it helps you heal, if it helps you grow, if it gives you focus, intention, and purpose, Let your reason be your reason, but I'm not going to be out here preaching to anybody what the reasons why are, because it will be different for everybody. It doesn't make sense. It's not supposed to. And it calls into question a lot of valid things, but where we get tripped up is when we get overly distracted by questions we don't have answers to. This is why we need to insource, right? Source from within more than we outsource. This is why, and this is the piece of the self-trust teaching that wanted to become more prevalent, which is that we can't separate self-trust from trust in the divine, from trust in God, the universe, creator, the great beloved, whatever you call or however it is that you relate to God or the divine. We have to work on our direct line to God, and the only intermediary we need is our own soul. So remember, you're here on the Embodied Podcast. My embodiment body of work looks at things from the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual perspective and does not leave God out of the conversation. So if that doesn't resonate for you, you're going to want to go learn about self-trust somewhere else. This is also a series about self-love, and we know this from our relationships with other people that we can't have healthy love without trust. So obviously, we also can't have healthy love for ourselves without trust. So we have to build trust within ourselves. One big part of this is discernment. I talk about discernment all the time. It is absolutely one of the most crucial things. I am well suited to teach this because I am a Virgo. Virgos are naturally discerning people. Some people will call it perfectionist, picky, detail-oriented. But when you evolve your Virgo-ness, it becomes to be about discernment. And discernment is not just reserved for Virgos. And so the difference between judgment and discernment, which we always have to talk about when we talk about discernment, is that judgment happens in the mind. Judgment is based on our programming and our conditioning and our ego. Discernment is straight up data coming from your body's wisdom. Discernment is just saying, this is for me or that's not for me. I'm a yes to that, I'm a no to that. That feels good, that doesn't feel good. That's it. Discernment is not about the evaluation. That's judgment, right? Judgment is always creating hierarchy. This is better than that. This is good. That's bad. Discernment is just yes or no. It's for you or it's not for you. And there's so many ways to land at this or arrive at this. And one of the reasons why discernment is so important is because something I've been saying throughout the series and really reminding us is that we are multidimensional beings. So when it comes to self-trust, it's not just this big sweeping generalization. Oh, I can trust myself. What part of yourself are you trusting? There are parts of yourself at various times in your life that you can trust with certainty. There are parts of yourself that you're going to want to give yourself a little bit of side eye, right? Your wounding, your trauma responses, those you're going to want to be like, okay, let me feel this all the way through because this might be coming from my fears. This might be coming from my wounds. This might be coming from my limited patterns, habits, beliefs, programs. This might be coming from, family contracts. This might be coming from things that, I have in my mind, like, that's not for people like me, or we being like our families or our communities or our cultures, we don't do that, So we have to consider when we're being discerning, what part of ourself do we want to trust? And we always want to home in on the part where the highest truth lives. That is your soul, right? That is your heart, right? Your heart is kind of like the gateway for the soul. Some of you, you hear me talk about human design. Some of you know what your authority is. If you have sacral authority, emotional authority, splenic authority, these other authorities, you'll also want to factor those in when you're being discerning, because that just gives you a map for how to read and what your body's feelings, sensations, and emotions are telling you. So this is why trust becomes deeper when assisted by trust in the divine. Self-trust comes more easily when informed by your soul's wisdom. So, because then you can determine what aspect of yourself you're actually tuning into, and you can tune in intentionally. And so here's a bunch of questions that are important. I'm not going to dig into these. These are actually all things that I'm covering in the self-love mini course because I need way more time to actually dive in and answer them responsibly. But so what do you actually trust? Your feelings, your senses, emotions, your thoughts, or your ideas? How do you know when something is coming from ego? How do you know when it's coming from intuition or trauma or fear? So again, those are things that I'm breaking down in the self-love mini course, which you can check out at wildsoulmovement.com/self-love. For the purposes of this episode, I want to explain that the broader trust in life and the divine can help handle all of that, because the thing that we can trust in is that we can't mess up. Whatever we choose to trust, any given moment can and will serve us eventually. And this is a part of trust that doesn't get talked about often. That something you can choose to trust in and abide by and take on as a belief or a perspective that guides you is that you will be okay no matter what. If you choose to trust that, trusting yourself becomes easier because you won't second guess. You'll be like, you know what? This is what I'm feeling and I'm going to trust it, because what I also trust is that no matter what happens, however it shakes out, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be able to land on my feet. It's going to grow me, or it's going to give me something to heal, but I will be okay. And obviously, that is not a promise for rainbows and butterflies all the time, right? The reason why in my body of work we look at the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual consciousness is ultimately to help people embody self-love, healing, wholeness, and liberation. So that means you embody as much of your soul as possible. And I believe that this is the purpose that we all share. People always want to know, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? This is your purpose. To know yourself as fully human and fully divine, and to really honor, recognize, and integrate that divinity. So from that perspective, everything is a growth opportunity. Everything is a chance to open more to love and go deeper into the mystery. And as well, you can trust that whatever you need to know, whatever needs to be revealed to you will, and whatever you actually don't need to know will remain a mystery, and you can accept that. So there's a saying a lot of people don't like, and it is the saying that God never gives you more than you can handle. Maybe you hate it. I have always loved this. I always felt tremendously comforted by the idea that a force much wiser than I am, that is not beholden to my limited beliefs, perspectives, or the constraints of my mind and my conditioning, believes that I can weather things, even the things that feel impossible, even the things that feel like they might break me. Because what that has always given me faith in is that I'm not going to break. I can do this. One of my biggest mantras during the most impossible times in my life, when I'm in the most pain and the most grief, things are so challenging, I don't have answers to any of the why or the how questions. I only know what's in front of me, what hurts, what's hard. One of the biggest things I fall back on is, well, if it's happening, I get through this. So let me just stay present. Let me just keep putting one foot in front of the other. If it's happening, I'm going to get through it. So my mantra is, I can do this. Just, I can do this. I can do this. Sometimes that's what gets me out of bed, when I just want to put the covers over my head and just stay and just hide from the world, hide from my responsibilities, hide from the challenges, right? I can do this. So I'm offering that mantra to you during your hardest times. I can do this. I can do this. And remember, we use mantras in my world, in the Wild Soul Movement practice, to help program the subconscious mind, to use the conscious mind to make impressions on the subconscious mind, so that based on repetition being the mother of all learning, we can cultivate this as a different truth, as a different experience, even if it's not right now, right? We're not lying to ourselves. We're literally uploading a different program. Just the same way we get programmed and conditioned by repetitive marketing and advertising and messaging and hearing people in our family say things over and over again, which, speaking on the topic of trust, let me just tell you, my grandpa, who I was very close with growing up, on my mom's side, and my abuelita on my dad's side, you never leave the house. You never leave a conversation with either one of them without hearing this phrase, don't trust anybody. So that was one of my deepest programs, that I can't trust anybody. So one of the reasons why self-trust has always been important is because I always knew I could trust myself. A lot of trouble trusting other people, right? But when we can trust ourselves, we start to see we can trust our instincts, our reads, our discernment about other people. So it all feeds into each other. It all helps each other out. So coming back to that saying, God never gives you more than you can handle. Trusting in that, putting my faith in that being a universal truth has brought me strength and solace on more occasions than I can count. It has inspired me to expand my capacity, to expand and deepen my resiliency to places like I didn't know I had. So part of my own trust practice centers on believing that anything that's happening is here to grow me, teach me, or heal me if I let it. So that's your choice. And as always, if that feels empowering to you, take it, try it on. See if it might be something that you can place your faith and trust in as well, that might help you guide your life. If you're not feeling it, it's okay. You know how I feel about these things. Something is for people, something is not for people, always in all these episodes, right? That might not be a thing that's for you, so ditch it if it's not. Another way to think of it is that it's easier to trust if you believe that there are no mistakes. Now, people don't like that either sometimes. And so let me be clear. What I'm not saying is that anyone deserves hard times, abuse, or shitty things to happen to them. But accepting that if something is happening, you are meant to make something out of it eventually helps a lot of people accept, right? Instead of feeling like a victim, instead of feeling sorry for themselves, and instead of just throwing their hands up like they have no say in what happens afterwards. So that's what I find empowering about that. Hard shit happens, traumatic things happen, really awful things happen. And we couldn't control that it happened, but we can control what comes next, what comes after, what we do with it. And then we can use our discernment, which we talked about earlier, to decide how we want to engage with those things. So self-trust allows you as well, in terms of engaging with others, to allow people to have their own experiences, to untangle yourself from people's energy, to not get so enmeshed, right? And it's not just like the big, deep enmeshments and entanglements. It's the little micro enmeshments with people all the time that simply are just from us not minding our own business, right? I think about this happens in family systems a lot, triangulation, right? Like when my mom calls me up to talk to me about my brother, and I'm like, listen, if Mikey wanted my guidance with this, he would ask me, or he could ask me, or I could offer, and he can say yes or no. Like, I'm not going to have a counsel right now about what's going on in my brother's life when he's not in the room. Because to me, that behavior doesn't breed trust with that person, right? So I don't do that. For years, I've been telling my mother, like, I'm not going to talk about this with you. She doesn't like that. We'll talk about things like that more when we get to boundaries. But there's also some respect involved in that, respect for ourselves and respect for others. But those types of things, right? Minding other people's business, getting up in other people's business, thinking we know better for other people than they know for themselves, rather than also, again, if we're going to choose to believe for ourselves that if it's happening, it's here to heal us, teach us, or grow us, we can also trust that if something's happening for someone else, it's here to heal them, teach them, or grow them. And we might not know why. And that's okay. We can stop trying to control other people. We can stop trying to manage other people when we are trusting, again, in the divine unfoldment of things. And that's not to skip out. That's not to abandon people. It's just, again, to be more discerning about how we want to engage with folks, how we want to be generous and supportive, loving and compassionate with people in ways that are both caring to them, but also us, right? Not doing that anymore at our own expense. We can stop overextending ourselves because, again, as we cultivate our own trust, we cultivate trust that other people are fine. They're going to be okay also. And we can let them walk their own path. And I know there's extreme situations and factors that make that more challenging, right? Like people with addiction or people with disabilities or people with conditions who literally need different levels of support and care and caretaking. I'm not talking about that stuff, right? That's nuanced. I'm talking about the more general, when someone is literally a fully capable adult. And that, again, I also don't want to say that people with addictions or disabilities or conditions are incapable. But again, there are certain circumstances, certain things that literally they might require different types of help and support than someone who doesn't have those things. And you know me, I'm always learning and growing around things like ableism, for example, which I know this falls under. So if I botched that, if I said anything there that didn't make sense or could use clarification, I always trust you all. Somebody ping me and let me know, set me straight. But I hope you get what I'm getting at there. So just like you're trusting in yourself to walk your own path and believing that it's unfolding divinely, again, we can look at others and go, God, like they got this. They got this. And it's not mine to get. We do not have to understand everything that's going on with other people. That's a control thing. That's a control issue. And again, we said control is one of the opposites of trust. So let's get back into that, because the other opposite of trust is surrender. And the combination of trust and surrender, I call allowing, right? I even have a whole tattoo that says allow. The word allow is tattooed on my body because this is something I am also constantly growing into and practicing. And we said this a little bit earlier. I'm going to repeat it because it bears repeating. Control comes from fear. So if you want to trust more, one of the places where you can start is by identifying the fears, the worries, and the doubts. And you will ask yourself this question: what do I want to experience instead? What am I afraid of? What am I worried about? What are my doubts? So what's on the opposite end of that? What do I want to be experiencing instead? If I wasn't afraid of that, what might be possible? If I wasn't so worried, how could I maybe feel about this? And that helps you to cultivate the energy to be more trusting, to be more open to things that are worthy of your trust and your time and your energy and your attention. Because we are all so conditioned towards external authority. So trust, again, is that key ingredient to developing inner authority. Aligning yourself with divine wisdom rather than human ideas, egos, systems, mindsets, many of which are rooted in oppressive systems, is one way that you get free. And you have to know the systems and acknowledge the systems so you can navigate them, right? You can't just bypass them. This is like learning the rules so you could break them. And something that you can trust is that you came here to break them. You came here to find their own way. There's no way you would be listening to my show, to my podcast, which lives on a website called untameyourself.com, if you were not here to forge your own path. But this is why we do this work together, because none of us are meant to do it on our own, right? If you can trust yourself, you know when to trust others. The relationship between trusting yourself and trusting life takes spiritual consciousness. Trust requires some surrender and some letting go. It requires facing yourself, seeing where you need to be right about things, letting go of needing to be right, being willing to not be right in order to find what's highest, best, and truest for us any given moment, any given time. So trust takes an enormous amount of courage, and it's an ongoing practice. We do it step by step. We do it bit by bit. And we learn how to trust without waiting for circumstances or situations to be ideal. We need to work with what's in front of us, work with where we are, work with what we have. So I want to dig into the questions that people gave me on Instagram about self-trust. All right. So somebody asked, how do you trust? What do you do when you feel inner conflict, right? When part of yourself is in conflict with another part of yourself. My answer for this is going to sound oversimplified, but the reason is because it doesn't come from overanalysis, right? When we have conflicts, the mind is involved in a way that is overriding or trying to override or logic or analyze the wisdom of the body, the knowing of the heart, the soul's wisdom, the higher truth. So when you feel at conflict with parts of yourself, you want to tune into which part of yourself is coming from love, which part of yourself is coming from or closest to compassion, gentleness, kindness, and a perspective that would benefit all involved, not just you. Meaning, because I understand that can sound paradoxical when we're saying, trust yourself, prioritize your own needs and things like that. But what I mean is not making choices that will have a harmful impact on others. So this is intent versus impact. So we have to also consider how our choices might impact other people, the world around us, and what will the broader, greater impact be? And also look at some of the things we've already talked about here. Where's the fear? Where are you coming from fear? Where are you coming from love or faith or higher wisdom? Trust the part of you that is steeped in those higher things, more aligned things. In the episode about self-knowledge, we talked about values and priorities. So you can also trust the part of yourself that is in greater alignment with your values and priorities. That's another way of looking at that. Someone asked, what about on stuff that I know are areas and practices that don't come easily to me? That just takes time. It just takes time. It takes time to move through and move with things that don't come easily to you. But the thing that you can trust is if something is repeatedly coming back to you, if something is showing up for you as something that you really need to do, that won't leave you alone, it's worthy of your time, effort, energy, and attention. Someone asked, how do you trust yourself after you allowed so much pain in your life? This is a beautiful question because the framing of that you allowed so much pain in your life begs for two things. One, which we talked about in self-acceptance, is forgiveness. You have to forgive yourself for whatever you perceive you allowed in your life. And then it comes back to something we've talked about all throughout this episode already, is that higher trust that if it happens, you were meant to make something of it, right? This divine perfection, even of tragic things. And again, I know some people won't align with that. Some people won't resonate with that, but that is my answer. That is my answer, to look at something and be like, damn, that was awful. But there had to be some useful thing that was meant to come out of it. And listen, when you are fresh up in a thing, in new pain, in new grief, in new trauma, in new tragedy, that is not usually the time to be going, this must be here to serve me. Some people it is. Some people can go right into that, and that's appropriate for them. Some people, you got to grieve it first. You got to heal it first. You got to unpack it. You got to be with it. You got to reattune your nervous system. You got to handle that stuff first. And then you can get to the forgiveness. And then you can get to the usefulness, gleaning the lessons and the learning. Some things continue to unfold over time. So another thing that you can trust is if whatever you need to know about a thing, you will know it. And you do not need to excavate. You do not need to dig and dig and dig and try to force a reason for something. You can let something go and trust that it will come back if there's something you need to know. So this is about self-gentleness. It's about being kind with yourself, about being forgiving. And again, going, of course, I allowed that. I didn't know what I didn't know. How could I have avoided it? I didn't know any better, right? We cannot hold ourselves to this impossible standard of I should have done something differently if we didn't have any context, if we didn't know what we could have done differently. This is literally how we learn. We learn and grow and heal through contrast. How do you work through the fear of trusting yourself when there's criticism all around you? So as a person who's always had a very rebellious nature, this has always been for me a fuel. If someone tells me I can't do something, I'm like, watch me. If I want to, right? I used to rebel for rebellion's sake, just to prove people wrong. So my answer for this is, see if and where you feel the need to prove anything to anyone other than yourself. Let go of needing the external validation or approval. See what's really true for you, what really matters to you. And then go out and do what you need to do. And let those people talk, right? Let those people talk. Mind your own business and do not be fazed by other people minding your business. Cut your cords from an energetic perspective. If you go to wildsoulmovement.com/energy, you can download my cord cutting and grounding practices. Cut your cords, move your body, use your mantras, do your embodiment work to get solid and attuned to your own truth, your own wisdom. And be willing to lose people. You might not lose them. I'm not out here saying you need to cancel everyone, you need to cut everyone out of your life. But you might need to distance yourself from those folks, right? Don't give them so much access to you. You fortify yourself. This is how you become resilient, so that their words, they just don't hit you the way that they used to. That's my answer for that. Someone asked, what do you think is the number one thing that blocks self-trust? And my answer is fear. And it's different types of fear for different people. It's these base fears, this need to be loved and liked. So this fear of abandonment. Fear of being alone, which relates to a fear of abandonment. Like if I really trust myself, am I going to ostracize everybody? Is it selfish? It's a fear. It's a lack of belief in our own wisdom, and it's a disconnection from that inner divinity, the part of ourselves that is infinitely wise, that is literally an expression of the divine. So I want to leave you in this episode. This felt appropriate. Someone shared this Hafez poem with me the other day. I love Sufi poets. I love them so much. And again, it might resonate for you. It might not resonate with you. This place where you are right now, God circled on a map for you. Wherever your eyes and arms and heart can move against the earth and sky, the beloved has bowed there. Our beloved has bowed there knowing you are coming. I could tell you a priceless secret about your real worth, dear pilgrim, but any unkindness to yourself, any confusion about others, will keep one from accepting the grace, the love, the sublime freedom divine knowledge always offers to you. Never mind, Hafez, about the great requirements this path demands of the wayfarers, for your soul is too full of wine tonight to withhold the wondrous truth from this world. But because I am so clever and generous, I have already clearly woven a resplendent lock of his tresses as a remarkable truth and gift in this poem for you. So the Sufi mystics, maybe that lands for you, maybe it doesn't land for you. But if you want to go deeper into this, check out the self-love mini course at wildsoulmovement.com/self-love. Share this. Find me on Instagram. Let me know what you thought. I know that this was both abstract and granular. I know that some of this will resonate for people. You might have some resistance to some of it. But I'm telling you, in my work, in my own life, with my own self, and with so many clients over the years, inviting the divine into the equation as you work your self-trust has been paramount for so many people, because it gets us off the hook of needing to know, be, do friggin' everything. And it helps us to feel safe and held and whole and connected and loved in ways that we might not necessarily be getting from the people in our lives, but that we absolutely need to feel steady and secure enough to even dare to trust ourselves. So again, thank you so much for tuning in. This was episode number 342. So there will be links to things I mentioned on the show notes page at untameyourself.com/342. If you are listening on any podcast player, leave a review, share it up, subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, leave a comment, all that stuff. Let me know how it was. I'd love to know these things from you. All right. Thanks, y'all.